Have you ever looked at a map of the United States and wondered how all those neat straight lines got there? It's a question as big and wide as the sky itself. Who drew them? Imagine your own backyard. Now, what if someone you didn't know came and drew a line right through the middle of it and said one side was no longer yours? That feeling, that question, is where our story begins. It's a story not just of lines on a page, but of people, of promises, and of a land that was home long before it was called America. Before any ships sailed across the great ocean, this land was a masterpiece, painted by a great artist. To the east, you'd see forests so green and dense, they looked like a soft, mossy blanket covering the hills. Giant trees, older than any story you've ever been told, stood like wise old guardians. The thick forests slowly gave way to wide-open prairies, a sea of grass that rippled and waved in the wind. Giant herds of bison, millions, moved like a slow, thundering river across the plains. At night, the sky filled with so many stars it looked like someone had spilled diamonds across a dark cloth. Further west, jagged mountain spires clawed at the sky, their peaks ringed with snow. Powerful rivers, born of melting snow, carved deep canyons, their rushing water a constant, powerful song. And on the other coast, sun-drenched deserts met a sparkling blue ocean, saguaros standing like sentinels. This land was a mosaic of different worlds, each with its own climate, animals, and beauty. It was not empty wilderness. It was a vibrant, living continent. Imagine standing in the heart of it all. This was home, full of life, stories, and meaning. Long, long before European ships were even a dream, this vast land was already home. It wasn't one country, but a continent of many nations, each with its own way of life. Each had its own language, traditions, and deep connection to the land. From longhouses in the forests to teepees on the plains, pueblos in the southwest, and coastal villages in the south, hundreds of neighborhoods with their own rules and stories. Many were expert farmers, planting corn, beans, and squash, the Three Sisters. On the plains, nations like the Lakota, Cheyenne, and Comanche followed the bison, living with the seasons and becoming extraordinary riders. In the hot Southwest, Pueblo nations built adobe homes and engineered irrigation to farm in the desert. In the frozen North, Inuit and Yupik peoples mastered life on ice and snow. Along the coasts, tribes like the Calusa built lives around waterways and fishing. Hundreds of languages, systems of government, trade routes, sacred beliefs, as different as English is from Chinese. This was not a vacant land waiting for a story. It was a continent already full of them. Then one day, something new appeared on the horizon. Imagine standing on a beach, where the only things you'd ever seen meet the sea are the sky and the birds, and suddenly, a floating house with giant white wings. This is how the arrival of European settlers must have looked to the first peoples. Wonder, confusion, and maybe fear. Who were these people with strange clothes, pale skin, and thunder-making booming sticks? They came for many reasons. Some for treasure, others for a new life or religious freedom, or to own land. They wanted to build fences, draw lines on maps, and hold a piece of paper that said, "This is mine." At first, many tribes helped the newcomers, teaching farming, medicine, and trade. But their way of seeing the land was different. For many tribes, land was shared, not owned. For settlers, owning land meant wealth, power, and freedom. This fundamental difference in understanding would become a source of great conflict. As more ships arrived and more people wanted land, curiosity turned into tension. The world of the first peoples was about to change forever. Imagine you are selling a bicycle. You make a deal, they pay you, and they ride away with your bike. Now imagine a friend who doesn't own the bicycle sells it to someone else without asking you. This is a simple way to think about one of the biggest land deals in history, the Louisiana Purchase. In 1803, President Thomas Jefferson wanted the port of New Orleans, vital for farmers shipping goods down the Mississippi. Napoleon needed money for wars. Instead of selling just New Orleans, he offered the entire Louisiana territory, from the Mississippi to the Rockies. The U.S. bought it for about $15 million. In an instant, the country doubled in size on paper, but the land wasn't Napoleon's to sell. It was home to dozens of native nations who had lived there for centuries. The Purchase set a wave in motion. Explorers like Lewis and Clark mapped it, and settlers began moving westward. On paper, it was a great deal. On the ground, it started a race for land that would push into the homes of those who had always been there. A legal sail across an ocean set a powerful wave toward people's lives. After the Louisiana Purchase, a new chapter began, one filled with meetings, documents, and promises. The United States used treaties, formal promises between nations, to manage relationships with native peoples. American officials would draw boundaries, promise reservations, and pledge that tribes could live undisturbed. They offered money, goods, food, and a promise. Give up some land and you'll get a protected place in return. Reservations were supposed to be permanent safe places where settlers would not bother them. But treaties were often written in English, a language many leaders did not understand. Translators could be unreliable. In many cultures, the idea of selling land was unthinkable. How could you sell the ground where your ancestors rest? Even worse, those promises were often broken. Words on paper proved as fleeting as promises whispered in the wind. Settlers hungry for land ignored boundaries. When conflicts arose, governments often sided with settlers, not the treaties. Time and again, the government demanded new treaties, shaving away more land. This cycle of promises made and broken created deep distrust and heartbreak. Paperwork created a paper trail, but often it covered up the reality on the ground. Of all the broken promises, one story stands out as one of the saddest in American history. The Cherokee, Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creek, and Seminole had tried to live peacefully alongside settlers. The Cherokee even created a written language and adopted a constitution modeled after the United States. But the land was fertile and perfect for cotton. Georgia passed laws to seize Cherokee lands. The Cherokee fought in the U.S. Supreme Court, and they won. But President Andrew Jackson refused to enforce the decision, famously saying, "John Marshall has made his decision, now let him enforce it." Instead, Congress passed the Indian Removal Act of 1830, using public money to force tribes off their lands. United States soldiers rounded up men, women, and children, forcing them into camps with little food or shelter. Then they were herded on a brutal 1,000-mile journey on foot, through bitter cold, sickness, and starvation. Over 4,000 of the 16,000 Cherokee died along the way. They were buried far from their homes. As years passed, the process of treaty-making and removal repeated across the continent. The new map, straight states and counties, was drawn over old maps of native homelands, leaving reservation islands. The great bison herds were hunted to near extinction, taking away lifeways for the plains tribes. Life on reservations was often difficult. Poor land, late or missing supplies. Yet through it all, people held on to culture and resilience. Today, there are over 570 federally recognized tribes, sovereign nations, reviving languages, and fighting for rights. They passed down stories, ceremonies, and crafts from grandparent to grandchild, keeping culture alive. And so we end where we began, with a question. What does it mean to be fair? How can we learn from the past to build a more just future? The story of America belongs to all of us, and the next chapter is ours to write.